Listen close, because what you're about to hear is not a rap beef. This is a 2-decade grudge match wearing a chart position as a mask, and tonight the mask finally slipped. A grown man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and another grown man who runs the loudest chicken wing kingdom hip-hop has ever seen, are standing in the summer of 2026 behaving like two teenagers in a middle school cafeteria daring each other to swing first. The tray between them is not a lunch tray. The tray is the Billboard 200. The cafeteria is not a school. The cafeteria is the whole internet. And the beef between them is old enough to be walking around with a learner's permit. So sit down for this one, because tonight the story is not the album. It is not the disc. It is not even that ugly little sales number that has been echoing across every podcast panel in America for 21 straight days. Tonight the story is one frozen half-second from a backstage hallway in 2008 that nobody wants to pull out of the archive anymore. One glance. One smirk. One petty little snapshot at a BET event that neither Rick Ross nor 50 Cent will ever admit on camera was the real match that lit this whole warehouse on fire. That single moment is why we are here on August 15, 2026, watching Rick Ross look dead into a lens and promise the internet, in the calm voice of a man who has been carrying a grudge in a diamond-plated chest for the better part of 18 years, that if 50 Cent ever passes Rick Ross in a hotel lobby, an airport terminal, a barbershop chair, or the front counter of a Wingstop location, Rick Ross is going to reach back and slap 50 Cent across the face on sight. Rick Ross said it. Not whispered. Not implied. Not buried inside a rap verse 3 minutes into a track nobody streamed. Rick Ross said it into a camera on August 6, 2026, and the internet has not stopped shaking since. Slap on sight. 3 syllables. One promise. 18 years of pressure released in a single breath. And here is the part nobody is telling you. Everybody on your timeline right now is playing accountant. Everybody is playing analyst. Everybody is playing chart historian. 19,000 units. 26,000 units. 42,000 equivalents. 2,000 copies in a single day. Number 39 on the Billboard 200. Every podcaster with a microphone has turned into a certified public accountant overnight. But nobody, and I mean not a single one of those loud panels, is willing to walk you back to the origin coordinate. Nobody is willing to open the door on the hallway where all of this actually began. So we are going to open that door together tonight, because August 2026 cannot be understood without a look at a backstage corridor in 2008, and a glance that Rick Ross swears in every interview never happened, and that 50 Cent swears was the funniest accident hip-hop has ever produced. Let me set the table properly. On July 17, 2026, Rick Ross dropped the 12th studio album of his entire career. He called it Set in Stone. It arrived through Gamma and his own Maybach music group. 19 tracks. A guest list stacked with T.I., Jeezy, French Montana, Gucci Mane, Don Toliver, and Kodak Black. 20 years into a career that has survived federal photographs, seizure warrants, a serious heart condition that would have knocked lesser men out of the room permanently, and a rival who has spent every single one of those 20 years trying to bury Rick Ross beneath the weight of the internet itself. On paper, Set in Stone was supposed to be the victory lap. On paper, Rick Ross had already won just by still being here. The album was the trophy. The trophy was already engraved. Rick Ross even named it Set in Stone so that anyone in 2026 with the audacity to whisper the word washed anywhere near his name would understand that Rick Ross cannot be scratched off the record. Then the leaks arrived. And the leaks were savage. Early industry projections whispered under 26,000 units for opening week. Then somebody, somewhere, one of those anonymous accounts that seems to exist only to detonate careers, dropped the ugliest number of them all. 2,000 copies in pure first-day sales. 2,000. Not 20,000. Not 200,000. 2,000. The kind of number a bedroom rapper posts on his second mixtape while begging for a repost. Not the kind of number that has ever been allowed to live under the name of the same Rick Ross who once shipped 187,000 copies of Port of Miami in a single week back in 2006. Sit with that gap for a second. From 187,000 in 7 days to a rumored 2,024 hours, inside the same career, under the same name, on the same chest. That is not a dip. That is a canyon. And 50 Cent, out of every single soul on this planet, was the last human being Rick Ross wanted standing at the rim of that canyon with a bullhorn in his hand. The number leaked at almost the exact minute 50 Cent was refreshing his Instagram feed, because in this particular universe the ugly number always leaks at exactly that minute. Curtis Jackson lives for that minute. Curtis Jackson waits for that minute the way a fisherman waits on a bite in still water. And the moment those 2,000 copies hit the timeline, Curtis Jackson picked up his phone and typed the coldest line a man has typed on a screen in a long time. A line that is stitched into the record forever now. I just saw your record sales, LOL, 2000, ? What the actual is happening? And then Curtis Jackson did the deadliest thing of all. He let it sit. No follow-up. No caption underneath. Just left the sentence floating there like an open door for the internet to walk through. And the internet did what it always does when Curtis Jackson leaves food on the porch. It ate. Then Curtis Jackson posted again. 20 features. Under 10,000 sales. Damn boy, it is over. Then Curtis Jackson posted a third time. A photo of himself eating popcorn, captioned with a line that Rick Ross is going to be replaying on his deathbed. So when your tickets do not sell and your album does not sell, what do? You promote car shows and you sell chicken wings. LOL. That chicken wing line landed different. That chicken wing line was not aimed at Rick Ross the rapper. That chicken wing line was aimed at Rick Ross the businessman. It was aimed at the Wingstop empire Rick Ross has spent more than a decade telling the entire world is the true crown on his head. It was aimed at the mythology of the biggest boss you have ever seen thus far, the man who supposedly eats better than anyone in the room. Curtis Jackson did not just come for Rick Ross's music. Curtis Jackson came for Rick Ross's dinner. And in this genre, coming for a man's dinner is louder than coming for a man's discography. By August 4, 2026, the official numbers finally locked in. 19,000 equivalent album units. Number 39 on the Billboard 200. The worst debut of Rick Ross's entire 12-album career. For scale, Richer Than I Ever Been opened at 34,000. Port of Miami opened at 187,000. Rick Ross has been, statistically, a 19,000-unit artist for exactly 1 week in 20 full years. And 50 Cent decided that the entire planet was going to remember that week for the rest of Rick Ross's natural life. So Curtis Jackson posted the eulogy. LOL. I am sorry. It is over. Cannot fake it forever. Then Rick Ross fired back with a poolside clip clapping like a champion. Curtis Jackson reposted the same clip with a caption that hit like a hammer. LOL, Rick Ross got away with it for a while, but it is over now. The jig is up. The jig is up. 4 words. Rick Ross is going to hear those 4 words when he closes his eyes at night. Tony Yeo joined in. Old G-Unit soldiers came out of the shadows to pile on. Comment sections turned into carnage. Meme pages had a field day. Podcasters lined up around the block for the autopsy. Every barbershop in America suddenly had a hot take. Every hip-hop show suddenly had a special segment. Every rap Twitter account with more than 1,000 followers suddenly had a monologue ready to fire. And for about 72 hours the obituary was already written. The self-proclaimed biggest boss in hip-hop had, according to the internet, been reduced to a 19,000-unit man dancing next to a swimming pool while Curtis Jackson posted popcorn emojis from the sidelines like a stadium announcer calling the final score. And then Rick Ross did the one thing nobody expected. He did not shrink. He did not apologize. He did not go quiet. Rick Ross doubled the boss. Rick Ross went at the numbers first. Real hip-hop lovers, Rick Ross said, should never fall for propaganda and inflated bot counts. Go test the product. Go listen to the music. Go ask yourself how strong the songs are. Rick Ross rolled out the counter figure. 63.5 million streams across the first 2 weeks. That works out to roughly 42,500 album equivalent units. More than double what the headlines were screaming. And then Rick Ross reframed the meaning of winning itself. I am already paid before the album drops, Rick Ross said. The fall-offs everybody sees on other artists, he argued, happen because those numbers were bot boosted from day one. The new flex is not bots. The new flex is the long game. And Rick Ross has been playing the long game for 2 full decades. Then, because subtlety has never once been on the Rick Ross menu, Rick Ross went straight at 50 Cent's business. The Shreveport, Louisiana move. The G-Unit film and television studio deal. The heavy local investment. How is it going in Shreveport? Rick Ross asked, sarcasm dripping like syrup off the corner of his mouth. You borrowed all those people's money. Did you give the money back yet? Give the people their money back, Curtis. And Rick Ross did not stop. Rick Ross dragged the entire faded G-Unit empire into the fire. Those G-Unit sneakers are going to end up on the discount rack at Costco, baby. Give Lloyd Banks his own high top now, since the Shreveport thing is not happening anymore. You can focus on the sneakers. Rick Ross declared Set in Stone the album of the year at number 39. And then, 5 days later, Rick Ross said the words that changed the temperature of this entire feud. Slap on sight. Now, this is where every other channel stops. Every other channel loops those 3 words over a graphic, drops the sales numbers underneath, and calls it a video. We are not doing that. We are walking you back to the exact frozen second in 2008 that this whole war was originally built on, because until you understand that second, none of the rest of this makes any kind of sense at all. Rewind the tape. Late 2000s. A BET event. Backstage. According to Tony Yayo, according to multiple people who were in the building that night, Rick Ross felt that 50 Cent gave him a funny look, a smirk, a snub. Depending on who is telling the story, 50 Cent did not acknowledge Rick Ross at all. That was the entire spark. That was it. No song stolen. No verse rejected. No feature refused. No money owed. A look. A single half-second glance in a hallway that neither man will ever describe the same way twice. Rick Ross took the look personally. And by January of 2009, Rick Ross had turned that glance into a disc record called Mafia Music, aimed dead at 50 Cent's personal life, at the mother of 50 Cent's son, at a very public and very ugly child support fight, and at a house that had in real life mysteriously burned down after a court ruling landed in Curtis Jackson's favor. That was the spark 50 Cent had been sitting on since he first learned how to press record. Because 50 Cent, as anyone who has watched Curtis Jackson operate for 25 straight years already knows, does not respond to diss tracks. Curtis Jackson responds to opportunities. And Rick Ross had just wrapped one in ribbon and left it on his front step. 50 Cent fired back with Try Me, on the old Trime50.com. And with Try Me came the nickname that has followed Rick Ross like a shadow ever since. Officer Ricky. Because before Rick Ross was Rick Ross, William Roberts had worked briefly as a correctional officer in Florida. In a genre built on street credibility, that revelation was a nuclear payload. And Curtis Jackson detonated it every single day. Every interview. Every skit. Every Instagram caption. Every piece of merchandise. For a solid calendar year you could not open a hip-hop blog without seeing the words Officer Ricky in a headline somewhere. It was, without any exaggeration, the most sustained public humiliation campaign one rapper has ever run on another. And it worked because it was true. Every photograph that surfaced from that facility was another visible crack in the boss costume Rick Ross had been carefully stitching since Port of Miami. 50 Cent recorded a video around that same period sitting in front of a camera as calm as a surgeon and delivered a sentence that reads in hindsight like a prophecy carved into the future. Nobody controls Curtis Jackson. Curtis Jackson does what Curtis Jackson wants to do. Curtis Jackson is going to mess Rick Ross's life up for fun. For fun. Those 2 words are the entire operating system of this beef. Because for 50 Cent, humiliating Rick Ross has never been business. It has never been personal in the way regular rap beefs are personal. It has always been a hobby. A pastime. A game 50 Cent invented and refuses to let end. A form of recreation for a man who has already earned every dollar he will ever need and has decided that all the leftover time will be spent forever in the group chat, on the Instagram feed, in the podcast studio, chipping away week by week at the mythology of Rick Ross, the biggest boss. What followed through the rest of 2009 was one of the most ruthless trolling campaigns hip-hop has ever witnessed. 50 Cent lined up interviews with Rick Ross's ex. 50 Cent aired out Rick Ross's private life inside cartoon spoofs and comedy skits, inside Pimpin' Curly videos, and inside an endless stream of digital content that landed on the timeline every single week without fail. 50 Cent literally took Rick Ross's baby mother shopping on camera with a bodyguard and a smile. Every shot 50 Cent fired was engineered to strip Rick Ross of the mythology Rick Ross had been building. The mansions. The Maybach. The boss persona. The gospel of the biggest boss you have seen thus far. 50 Cent was not trying to win a rap battle. 50 Cent was trying to dismantle a costume, thread by thread, in front of a live studio audience. Rick Ross kept swinging. Rick Ross gave 50 Cent a fake 48-hour deadline to produce a better diss. Rick Ross released Kiss My Pinky Ring. Rick Ross filmed the video for In Cold Blood inside an actual funeral parlor, complete with a staged memorial for the fictional death of Curtis Jackson. And here is the twist nobody in 2009 saw coming, and that most of the internet in 2026 has already forgotten. The beef was supposed to end Rick Ross. Instead, the beef built Rick Ross into a monument. When Deeper Than Rap dropped in April of 2009, the album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, moving somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 copies in its first week. Industry sales data from that stretch showed that the beef was actually boosting both catalogs simultaneously. Rick Ross's back catalog jumped 62%. Curtis Jackson's back catalog jumped 74%. The war was, in strict accounting terms, the greatest free marketing campaign either man ever ran. Neither one of them had to spend $1. They were paying each other in attention, and the attention was minting cash on both sides of the ledger. But the war never actually ended. The war just changed clothes. In 2011, the collateral damage became tragically real when an associate connected to Rick Ross's camp was killed, a grim reminder that rap beef can bleed into physical life whether the principals want it to or not. The 2010s rolled in and the shots kept flying. Lawsuits. Social media jabs. Rick Ross declaring 50 Cent finished. 50 Cent mocking every commercial stumble Rick Ross ever tripped on. When Rick Ross's numbers dipped, 50 Cent was there. When 50 Cent's television empire grew, Rick Ross was there calling it smoke and mirrors. Streaming replaced downloads. TikTok replaced radio. Entire generations of rappers were born, went platinum, and were forgotten inside the lifespan of this feud. And through every era, somewhere in the world, 50 Cent was clowning Rick Ross. And Rick Ross was promising that when the two of them finally crossed paths, the promise would be collected in person. Which brings us straight back to right now. August 2026. And the uncomfortable question that everybody is dancing around. Who is actually winning this war? Because 50 Cent's case has never been stronger. 19,000 units is 19,000 units. Number 39 on the Billboard 200 is a fact, not a rumor. And this is the same Rick Ross who declared Drake washed after the Iceman rollout and then had to sit courtside while Drake spent 4 straight weeks at number 1, while Rick Ross himself was busy posting the worst opening week of his entire 20-year career. Hot 97's Kid Capri twisted the knife on air, pointing out that Rick Ross could have benefited from Drake's momentum instead of dismissing it out loud. The irony is almost too clean. Rick Ross spent years playing referee on who is still relevant, and the second Rick Ross blew the whistle on somebody else, the numbers turned around and pointed straight back at him. But Rick Ross's counter is not empty either. 20 years in the game. An independent deal with Gamma, which means Rick Ross keeps a much bigger slice of a smaller pie than any traditional label artist ever gets to see. Wingstop. Car shows. Real estate portfolios you cannot count on both hands. The brand is the business now. And the business, as Rick Ross has been saying for a full decade, is what actually pays the mortgage. If Rick Ross's streaming claim is even close to accurate, the 2,000 copies narrative that 50 Cent weaponized was never the full picture. It was a snapshot of pure first-day sales dressed up as a career diagnosis. And 50 Cent, more than anyone else alive on this planet, knows the difference between a snapshot and a season. Which is exactly why 50 Cent will never publicly admit that difference on camera. Because the moment 50 Cent admits it, the entire 2000 joke stops working. So who is right? Maybe both. Maybe neither. And here is where I have to say the sentence nobody in either camp wants to hear out loud. This war has not been about music since roughly 2011. This war is about identity. 50 Cent built the legend of Curtis Jackson on being the man who ends careers. Ask Ja Rule. Ask anyone who ever tried to stand across a booth from 50 Cent in the mid-2000s. Admitting that Rick Ross survived Curtis Jackson would mean admitting that there is one man in the entire industry who Curtis Jackson could not finish off. And Rick Ross built the legend of the biggest boss on being untouchable. The correctional officer photographs did not break Rick Ross. The diss records did not break Rick Ross. The baby mother shopping trips did not break Rick Ross. Admitting that 50 Cent's trolling actually hurts now would be admitting that the armor Rick Ross has been welding for 18 straight years has cracks running through it. Neither man can walk away. Walking away is losing. And so, 18 years after a smirk that may or may not have actually happened in a hallway backstage at a BET event, a 50-year-old television mogul is posting popcorn emojis about album sales, and a 49-year-old rap boss is standing in front of a camera swearing to slap Curtis Jackson across the face on sight. Will Rick Ross actually do it? Realistically, no. In nearly 2 decades, Rick Ross and 50 Cent have never once thrown physical hands at each other. Their teams famously scuffled at the BET Hip Hop Awards in 2012. But the two principals have kept the war strictly verbal, strictly digital, strictly psychological. The slap is almost certainly a promise that will never be collected in a hallway. But that is not the point. The point is that Rick Ross needed to say it out loud, because in the internal economy of this particular feud, saying it is the same as doing it. The threat is the product. The promise is the punchline. The image of Rick Ross's open palm connecting with 50 Cent's cheek is the meme Rick Ross planted in your brain. And every time somebody sees a photograph of 50 Cent from now on, that image will flicker underneath it for half a second whether they want it to or not. Rick Ross knows exactly what he is doing. And so does 50 Cent. Because the second Rick Ross said slap on sight, Curtis Jackson went straight to the lab, somewhere in New York or Shreveport or a hotel suite that costs more per night than Set in Stone earned per hour, and Curtis Jackson is already scripting the response. History says the response will land within 24 hours of any real spark. History says the response will be merciless. History says the response will not be a diss track. It will be a photograph. Or a caption. Or a 15-second Instagram clip that ends careers with the sound off. Curtis Jackson has been doing this since Ja Rule was still trying to spell his own name in the credits. Curtis Jackson is not about to break the streak now. Here is the piece nobody is putting on top of the story. Everybody is treating this like a business feud. It is not. This is a family argument that never got resolved at a dinner table. 18 years of two men refusing to speak first. Refusing to let it go. Refusing to admit that the whole thing started with a glance that neither of them probably even remembers correctly at this point. Rick Ross is Miami. 50 Cent is Queens. Rick Ross drives Maybachs. 50 Cent drives conversations. Rick Ross sells wings. 50 Cent sells vodka and television shows. On paper, the two of them should never have crossed paths long enough to hate each other. In practice, hip-hop is a small hallway, and two big men are always going to find each other inside a small hallway, and one of them is always going to feel like the other one looked at him wrong. There is one more layer nobody is talking about, and I am going to put it on the record right here. Watch what happens to Rick Ross's streaming numbers over the next 30 days. Watch what happens to the Set in Stone backend. Watch what happens to Wingstop's late-night traffic in Miami and Atlanta. Watch what happens to 50 Cent's next Instagram engagement chart the moment the response drops. Because if the 2009 data is any indication, both of these men are about to see a spike that no marketing team on the planet could have purchased. That is the ugly little secret of this feud that nobody in either camp will ever admit out loud. Every slap threat. Every popcorn emoji. Every leaked sales number. Every jig is up caption is a receipt. And the receipts are being cashed in on both sides. The feud is the product. The feud has always been the product. And 2026 is not the ending. 2026 is a reissue with fresh packaging and a new coat of gasoline on the fuse. So the sales question is the wrong question. Ask yourself the correct one. What does it cost a 50-year-old man to keep coming back to Instagram week after week, year after year, decade after decade, to post one more popcorn emoji at the same target he has been aiming at since 2009? And what does it cost a 49-year-old man 20 years into an empire to stand in front of a camera and threaten to slap another grown man across the face over a single chart position? The answer in both directions is the same. It costs them nothing. Both of them have already made the money. Both of them have already built the empires. Both of them have already outlived every peer who was supposed to have finished them off by now. The only currency left between them, the only thing they can still spend on each other, is attention. And attention is the currency of 2026. So they are burning it on each other on purpose, because neither one of them can imagine an internet in which the other one is not standing there in it. Take 50 Cent out of Rick Ross's timeline and Rick Ross has to invent a new villain from scratch. Take Rick Ross out of 50 Cent's timeline and Curtis Jackson loses the one single hobby that has kept his phone in his hand for 18 straight years. Neither man can afford that quiet. Rick Ross said set in stone. 50 Cent said the jig is up. Both of those sentences are trying to write the same headline. That headline reads "This ends with me on top." And here is the ugly beautiful truth of it. Neither of them gets to write that headline, because the headline is being written by you. By the comment section. By the memes. By the retweets. By the next leaked number and the next popcorn emoji and the next interview where one of them promises something the other one will never let go of. This is not a fight to the finish. This is a rally. And a rally only ends when one of them stops swinging, which is to say, this ends never. So the real question tonight is not who won the week. The real question is who has the appetite to keep swinging into year 20. Because whichever of these two men gets tired first is the one whose empire quietly starts to lose its light. And right now, in the middle of August 2026, neither one of them looks tired. Both of them look wide awake. Both of them look hungry. Both of them look like they have been waiting for a fresh reason to press record. There is another dimension to this that the accountants online keep missing. Every diss between these two triggers a media secondary market. Reaction videos. Podcasts. Blogs. Streaming service curation. The catalog of both men gets a lift every single time one of them speaks. That lift is not a rumor. That lift is measurable. That lift is why the algorithm rewards them for continuing to poke at each other, and it is why the algorithm is going to reward you for watching this video all the way to the end, because attention on this feud is a self-fueling engine and every eye that lands on it makes the engine run hotter. Look at 50 Cent's calendar for the next 30 days. Curtis Jackson is not sitting still. Curtis Jackson has television production commitments. Curtis Jackson has a liquor brand that keeps expanding. Curtis Jackson has a real estate footprint spreading across states most rappers do not even have zip codes in. Every one of those enterprises benefits from the noise. Every one of those enterprises gets a free promotional push every time Rick Ross says his name. Now look at Rick Ross's calendar. The album cycle. The car shows in Fayetteville and Atlanta. The Wingstop expansion into markets that were not on the map 5 years ago. The Maybach Music Group roster that needs eyes on it. Every one of those enterprises benefits from the noise too. This is not two men arguing. This is two publicly traded personal brands running a joint promotional campaign that neither one of them has to sign a contract for. And that is why the slap will almost certainly never happen. Because both of them understand, whether they will admit it or not, that the day one of them actually touches the other one is the day the promotional cycle ends. Once a body is on the ground, the meme is over. Once a hand hits a face, the receipts stop generating. Both of them are too smart, and both of them are too paid, to blow up the very engine that has been printing revenue for the better part of 2 decades. The threat is worth more than the hit. The rumor is worth more than the confrontation. The promise is the punchline. Let me pause on that word attention for a second, because it is doing more work in this story than any other single word in the entire English language right now. Attention is oxygen. Attention is water. Attention is the one resource neither Rick Ross nor 50 Cent can manufacture on their own. Rick Ross can bake all the wings in Miami. 50 Cent can film all the television seasons in Shreveport. Neither of those enterprises means anything without eyeballs on it. And nothing in the year 2026 generates raw eyeballs faster than two men who genuinely appear to want to slap each other in a Wingstop parking lot. So the beef is not just a byproduct of ego. The beef is the top of the funnel. The beef is the reason you are watching this right now. The beef is the reason the algorithm is going to slide this video onto 3 million more phones by the time the sun comes up tomorrow. And Rick Ross knows it. And 50 Cent knows it. And you know it too, whether you want to admit that out loud or not. There is a moment in every long feud where the participants stop hating each other and start needing each other. Rick Ross and 50 Cent hit that moment somewhere around 2015 and never turned back. The public performance of hatred is now the choreography. The choreography now sells the product. And the product is the version of Rick Ross the internet gets to laugh at, and the version of 50 Cent the internet gets to cheer on, and the version of both men the internet gets to argue about in the barbershop and the group chat and the reply column underneath every single Instagram post they publish for the rest of their natural careers. Neither one of them is going to let that machine turn off. Neither one of them can afford to let that machine turn off. That machine is what pays the property taxes on Miami and Queens simultaneously. So what should you take home from all of this? Take home the fact that Rick Ross had the worst opening week of his career and still walked to a camera and dared 50 Cent to walk past him. Take home the fact that 50 Cent has 100 other things to do with his time and still spends part of every single week composing captions aimed at a man he claims is already finished. Take home the fact that 18 years ago a smirk in a hallway lit a fire that has burned longer than most marriages in this country. And take home the fact that both of these men have gotten so wealthy off of that fire that neither of them can imagine putting it out. Take home the fact that the 2,000 copies number is real and the 63 million streams number is also real, and both numbers can live inside the same career without contradicting each other, because that is how the modern music business actually works in 2026. Take home the fact that Officer Ricky was the deepest wound of Rick Ross's entire career, and Rick Ross still went on to build a business empire that most of Curtis Jackson's own G-Unit soldiers could only dream about. Take home the fact that Curtis Jackson has been laughing at Rick Ross for 18 years and Rick Ross has been printing money for 18 years, and the laughing and the printing are, whether either one of them wants to admit it publicly, happening at the exact same time on the exact same timeline. And take home one more thing that most of the analysts on your timeline are refusing to say out loud. The reason Rick Ross said slap on sight in that specific week, in that specific tone, with that specific calmness in Rick Ross's voice, is because Rick Ross understands the modern algorithm better than any rapper of Rick Ross's generation. Rick Ross understood that a threat delivered with a shrug is 100 times more viral than a threat delivered with a scream. Rick Ross understood that saying it once, on camera, and then walking away, produces a clip that lives on every timeline for a full month. Rick Ross understood that Curtis Jackson could not resist quoting it back. Rick Ross understood that Rick Ross was baiting a response, not asking for a fight. And when Curtis Jackson quoted the slap on sight promise back on Instagram the very next morning, Curtis Jackson also understood that Curtis Jackson was participating in the exact promotional loop Rick Ross had just designed. Both of them walked into the trap knowing it was a trap, because the trap is the entire point of the operation. There is one final wrinkle in this story that almost nobody has connected out loud, and I want to plant it in your brain before we close this file. Rick Ross's slap threat did not come out of nowhere. It came exactly 3 days after Curtis Jackson posted the chicken wing caption. 3 days. That is not a coincidence. That is a countdown. Rick Ross needed 72 hours to sit with the humiliation of the chicken wing line before Rick Ross could respond in a way that felt proportional. And when Rick Ross finally did respond, Rick Ross did not respond to the album. Rick Ross did not respond to the sales number. Rick Ross responded to the food. Because the food is the one part of the empire that lives outside the recording booth. The food is the part Curtis Jackson cannot claim to have ended. The food is the part Rick Ross will still be selling in the year 2040 when both men are grandfathers. So when Rick Ross said slap on sight, Rick Ross was not defending the album. Rick Ross was defending the wings. Rick Ross was defending the empire that will outlive the discography. And that is a distinction most of the internet has completely missed. Tell me straight in the comments. Do not soften it. Do not moderate it. I do not read moderated takes. Tell me which side you are actually standing on. Tell me whether Rick Ross should collect the slap or let it slide. Tell me whether 50 Cent has finally landed a punch that will not wash off, or whether Rick Ross is right and the definition of winning in 2026 is a 20-year brand, a bot-free stream count, and an independent deal that keeps the check inside the house. Tell me if you think this beef ever actually ends, or if the two of them are going to be trading jabs from opposite sides of a nursing home dining room 40 years from now. Tell me if the chicken wing line was the funniest sentence Curtis Jackson has ever typed, or if the slap on sight promise was the coldest sentence Rick Ross has ever said out loud. And while you are down there, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, because 50 Cent's response is already loading in a chamber somewhere. And when that response lands, this channel is going to be the first place breaking it down bar for bar, post for post, receipt for receipt. Keep the volume up. Keep the notifications loud at all times. And remember the one thing that matters most in this whole story. The beef is not the product. The beef is the business. And business, on both sides of this hallway, is very, very good.